we do have a foreign policy. We even revamped it recently. The actions that are taken by those in power on behalf of the government of Kenya and on behalf of the citizens, over time form a pattern. And we seem to have formed a pattern in this country for always entertaining African leaders whom other African countries may not particularly be happy with. Okay? Omar al-Bashir, when he was wanted by the ICC and had been declared persona non grata in many countries and a warrant of arrest had been issued, we entertained him. Sahawarians, these are people, individuals who have had an ongoing tiff with Morocco for the longest possible time. Essentially saying that, you know them, independent. Algeria saying yes, we understand. Morocco saying no. Problem. So you have a problem there. Now we have this situation. But against this backdrop, remember, we've had many peace accords signed in Nairobi. Peace accords, meaning both sides of the conflict came here. When Somalia was having their problems, many meetings were held in this very country. With the likes of retired General Sumbewo and Bethuel Kiplagat, Kalonzo Musyoka. Yes. And even when there were problems in West Africa, we had Kenyans going there to try and see if they can bring the warring parties together. Before South Sudan became independent, very many meetings regarding the problems that were there were held here. Okay? Kenya has been home to very many refugees from neighboring African countries who have had difficulties in their own countries, and they have been domiciled here in Kenya. So Kenya has had that reputation as being a haven for peace and stability for many African countries. Right now, we seem to be changing that narrative. If you have a situation where you have people in your country who seems to be at odds with other citizens of their country, and you entertain them, having them come to talk is one thing. Having them come to declare that they are forming a different and an alternate government when the country claims to have an existing government, what then are you saying you are supporting? And further to that, CT, this legitimate government which operates in South Sudan, the workings towards the establishment of that legitimate government happened in Nairobi. Yes, it did. It happened in Nairobi. Yes, so now what are we doing? So what are you saying? But then let's look at Sudan. You know, Sudan has had internal conflicts for quite a while. Yes. I'm not going to go into prehistoric times. I'm just going to go into this century. Yeah. Between 1955 and 1972, we had the first Sudan civil war, because what we are experiencing now amounts to a civil war. In that time, there was no South, there was no North, it was just Sudan. Okay? And this one, my friend, it ended up with the Addis Ababa Agreement granting autonomy to the South. Okay? 55 to 72. Do you know how many years those are? 10 plus 7, 18. 17, 18 years. Yeah. Yes. That war. Okay? The second, there are second one. Second Sudanese Civil War, 1983 to 2005. Why? Because it was sparked when Sharia law was imposed and the central government's marginalization of the South. They said, we are not taking this thing. Okay? Millions died. Yeah. Then we had the Darfur conflict. 2003 to now. That conflict has not ended. No, it is still ongoing up to now. Then you have the current war. It pits the president. You talk about 2019. There was Omar al-Bashir was still president then, isn't it? Yes. And there was a struggle between him and the military factions, notably the Sudan Armed Forces, SAF, and the Rapid Special Forces. The point is this. When you have a history of internal conflict, it is so much easier to go back to that particular factory settings. The idea behind the peace accords is so that you bring a halt to that history, because whatever happens in these conflicts, the civilians of that country bear the greatest brunt of this. They're the ones who get killed, they're the ones who get displaced, and everything about the normalcy of their lives is disrupted. And now we as a country have in the past been the place you came to resolve these issues. Are we saying that the current steps we have taken have put us on a higher pedestal as the country you go to when you want to resolve internal conflict?
Even as we're speaking, lives are still being lost. And of course, you can see here that both sides, and I'm talking about both sides, what is on the ground is that both of these sides are increasingly resorting to brutal tactics. All right. And of course, we are having this described as a humanitarian crisis. It's slowly, gradually, gaining momentum to something even worse. And we're looking at, about 56 or more, recently killed. So if Kenya has this real picture, having this one side coming in is something that is really, really causing more uproar, because the fact that we know exactly what is happening on the ground. And I like how CT has just put it. It's not a new thing. It's been a line of conflicts year after year. And at this point in time, being on one side really, truly something to interrogate.
This war has disrupted very many things. One, agricultural productivity has been interfered with.
Yes.
Business processes, trade have been interfered with. So you have extreme poverty. Sudan has a population of around 50 million.
Yeah.
25 million, 50%, nearly 50% of this population right now are facing food insecurity. Over 2.9 million children are now malnourished as a result of this. And you talk about healthcare access, that has also gone to the dogs. If you're talking about displacements, 11.5 million people have been displaced since the conflict began in April 15, 2023. How can this be a good thing?
Well, I mean,
Cannot
sure.
be a good thing.
I just want to look at, something really quickly before we go into the next story here, because this is an unfolding situation. Tomorrow will be interesting to see what is going to happen if they're actually going to name this parallel government. But if we also look at the tactics of diplomacy, if we look at the tactics of the implementation of, resolutions for peace and conflict, and it's been said that once you do something like this, that this brazen move, and this is what also pundits are saying, that this brazen move by Kenya to allow you to come and establish your parallel government essentially would be to invite Al-Burhan to the table, right?
Pretty much.
That we know that no explanation has been given to the Tuesday event, but some are saying that it's probably because Kenya wants to force Sudan's president, General Abdel Fattah al-Burhan, the leader of the Sudan Armed Forces, to come to the negotiating table.
Kenya wants to force him.
Well, I mean, if they've tried before to have a conversation where they say, come and have a conversation and let us reason together, and it didn't happen. If you then see that I'm allowing this other side to come and establish a government, the likelihood of you coming to say, hey, what's going on here, then becomes greater. The argument, however, may not make a lot of sense, given that the SAF is rapidly making gains on the battlefield and has so far almost captured the entire city of Khartoum, which had a population of about 7 million before the war. Now, we need to make the distinction. We are not talking about South Sudan. We're talking about Sudan. Khartoum is the capital, and that's what we're talking about. South Sudan on its own.
There are those who also argue that at the rate these things are escalating, Sudan may soon become Libya or Syria.
Syria.
Yes. Now,
very disheartening.
If you're looking at just the disarray and the conflict has caused in these two countries, there is no country to speak of, really, because it's like every aspect of that country is at war.
I think it's also important for us to note here that in June 2023, Al-Burhan opposed President Ruto's chairmanship of the Intergovernmental Authority on Development, that's IGAD, on a specific mediation committee, stating that Kenya was not neutral and was also hosting RSF leader General Mohammed Hamdan Dagalo Al-Hemeti. Now, these are the two individuals, Hemeti and Burhan. Sudan rejects Kenya's chairmanship of the IGAD committee to address the current crisis in Sudan because the Kenyan government and its senior officials have adopted RSF positions, sheltered its elements, and provided them various types of support. Are they wrong?
Types of support.
Are they wrong with what we are seeing happening here? So that's what could make sense in diplomatic circles, that it's possible that they were doing this so that Burhan can now come to the table. But let's see.